Welcome to the World Rally Championship Review 2009. This is a sport with a history of dramatic twists and turns played out in the intense battle for both the drivers and the manufacturers' championships. This year would live up to any that have gone before. We have witnessed enthralling contests against the odds, proving that in this most pulsating of motorsports, it's never over until the champagne sprays. Sit back and enjoy all the drama of one of the closest sport championship battles in recent memory. Before we get things underway, let's put some names to faces. The start of the 2009 season saw some familiar rivals squaring up to slug it out for the championship. The now 5-time world champion Sébastien Loeb would lead the Citroën team, supported by the increasingly reliable Spaniard Dani Sordo. Ford's challenge would be spearheaded by Loeb's closest contender Mikko Hirvonen. The Finn had run Loeb close through 2008. Could this be the year that he wrestled the Frenchman's title away? Ford's number 2 is another young Finn. Jani-Matti Latvala has been tipped for the top. He's a driver known to have natural talent and raw speed in abundance, but one that also needs to realise the importance of his role as a team player. Henning Solberg and Matthew Wilson would both continue as the Stobart VK drivers and would be challenged this year by the new Citroën Junior team, featuring a lineup from Sébastien Ogier, Evgeny Novikov and Konrad Rautenbach. More notable were the faces not in the original lineup at the start of the season. 2009 was the year that the world tightened its belt as the downturn from the credit crunch spread across the globe. The World Rally Championship felt the pinch as both Suzuki and Subaru withdrew before the season began. This left 2003 world champion Petter Solberg without a drive at the start of the year. It would not be the last we'd see of the Norwegian, though. He was desperately exploring any option to get back in the championship. The curtain raiser to the 2009 season was Rally Ireland. Before the events, tyres were the main subject of debate. The FIA had sanctioned the use of an extreme tyre to help the crews cope with the weather. For the first time in over a year, tyre choice would play a part. Sébastien Loeb had gone for tarmac rubber, and it was the world champion off the line first. Early indications were that he and Citroën had made a rare mistake. After the first stage, he was 7th. Mikko Hirvonen had a bizarre start to the rally. The lights ended up glaring back through the windscreen until Mikko realised he could turn them off. He was off the pace, but made it up to 3rd by the end of day 1. Ford's number 2, Jani-Matti Latvala, was on the winter tyre and at this stage leading the rally. A resounding thump there though, and after starting so well, perhaps the young Finn was too confident. He broke a steering arm, and with his day over, the anguish was written all over his face. Stage 6 was the defining test of the afternoon. It was now Chris Atkinson's time to go on a charge. In a one-up appearance for the Citroën Junior team, after 2 stages he'd moved up an impressive 5 places. The interesting fight was Atkinson closing in on Henning Solberg. The Queenslander was giving his all. But you can see here that Chris braked far too late and aquaplaned out of control. Sébastien Loeb held the overnight lead by 44 seconds from Dani Sordo, but more importantly, his chief rival for the championship, Hirvonen, was over a minute behind. Loeb showed why he is the 5-time world champion and the master of this surface. By the end of the second day, he was over a minute ahead of teammate Sordo and 2.5 minutes in front of Hirvonen. The rain had finally stopped on day 3. Henning Solberg battled with Atkinson, and the Aussie had taken a 5-second lead. Henning was the first of the 2 into stage 18 and posted an incredible time, beating Sordo and Loeb. The pressure was on Atkinson, and he buckled this off on the first corner, handed 4th place back to Solberg. Dani Sordo finished 2nd, confirming Citroën's dominance on this surface. And Loeb closed out victory on the final stage run through the streets of Donegal, much to the delight of the local crowd and the Citroën team. Hirvonen was 3rd. He must have been scratching his head about how to stop the Frenchman. The second round of the year heralded the return of Rally Norway for the only snow event of the season. Loeb was first into action, with the rest of the field hoping that this surface would once again get the better of him, as it had here in 2007. Kiervanen led for the whole day, but backed off on the last stage to hand Loeb the lead and the dubious honour of running first on the road for day 2. Rally Norway was Petter Solberg's comeback, and he delighted the home crowd, battling with Danny Sordo for 4th. PG Andersen won his first ever stages in the afternoon and was running in 6th place. Kiervanen started the second day just 2.6 seconds behind Loeb, with the gamble of allowing Seb to take the lead the previous night pay off. It appeared not, as Loeb won all of the opening stages of the day, extending his lead to 10.7 seconds. Lower down the field, Petter Solberg was having problems with his 3-year-old Citroën Zara, which just didn't have the power to compete on the fast stages. Both brother Henning and PG Andersen moved ahead as he slipped to 7th. Henning Solberg then went on to win the first stage of the afternoon and snatched 4th place from Danny Sordo. Mikko's gamble appeared to have backfired as Seb opened up a 15-second lead for the final day. It was going to be tough for the Finn, but victory was still a realistic aim for Kiervanen, with 6 stages still to run. Jari-Matti Latvala will have been pleased to take the final podium place and earn 6 points, at times making the most of the Norwegian snowbanks. But all eyes were on the battle for first. By the end of the first 2 stages, on the final loop of 3, Mikko had slashed Seb's lead to a mere 7.7 seconds with just 1 stage to run. It had been a classic battle in fantastic conditions. Had Kiervanen done enough? Not quite. Seb crossed the line for victory. The expression on his face at the end showed how much it meant to him. 2 wins from 2 for Sebastian Loeb, and things were starting to look ominous for his rivals. Mikko Kiervanen and teammate Jari-Matti Latvala did all they could to stay in touch. The good news for all WRC fans was that Petter Solberg was back on the leaderboard. Mikko could take scant consolation in the fact that he continued to score points and had at least stayed in touch with Sebastian in the Drivers' Championship. Citroën had begun to build an early lead in the manufacturer's race. Coming up, the 2009 championship heats up as the pressure begins to build in the title races. Welcome back to the 2009 season review. The Cyprus Rally promised to be a step into the unknown for drivers and team engineers alike. For the first time since 1996, a rally would feature a mixed surface format. To save costs, the teams had all agreed to use gravel tyres and brakes all weekend, including on the tarmac. Sebastian Loeb's decision to use partly worn tyres on the opening loop, as he felt they would provide him with increased grip and stability, was inspired. He raced into a 22-second lead. Slotting into 2nd place, despite the alien sensation of driving on tarmac with gravel tyres, was Citroën's number 2, Danny Sordo. Ford's Finns had no answer to the C4's pace, and despite a belated switch to use rubber in the afternoon tarmac loop, Kiervanen could get no higher than 3rd, ending the day a minute behind the rally leader. A very different challenge awaited the crews on Saturday morning, and overnight rain meant that muddy, slippery conditions would make the going even tougher. Sebastian Loeb suffered a couple of scares on the day's long gravel stages. Mikko Kiervanen, meanwhile, was in his element on the wet gravel and soon overhauled Danny Sordo's 2nd spot. There was little the Finn could do to cut into Loeb's lead, though. Latvala too started the day in fine form, winning the opening stage. The following test would see another costly misjudgment, though. After clipping one corner, he was flipped across the road and into a ditch. He had to run a kilometre to find spectators to help him get the car out, losing 22 minutes in the process. Any hopes of a podium finish were long gone. Following Latvaler's delay, Petter Solberg found himself in fourth and began an inspired chase on the WRC Citroën C4 of Sordo. Loeb and co-driver Daniel Eleanor were forced to bleed the brakes in the road section before the final stage, and this firing engine caused a spin, which reduced their advantage out front to just under 50 seconds.
What backfired him, mate.
The battle to watch on the final day was that for third between Sordo, who was under pressure to secure another strong finish for Citroën, and Petter Solberg, who suddenly found himself in the hunt for a podium place. The former world champion had an early scare when a gearbox problem caused a stall, costing him precious seconds. In the end, though, he stormed past the Spaniard to secure his first podium finish of the year and spark wild scenes of celebration at the finish line.
Definitely third.
Sebastien Ogier had been fighting Matthew Wilson for fifth, and it seemed he'd done enough after passing the Brit on the penultimate test. In his efforts to stay ahead, though, just 400 metres from the finish line, he would come unstuck. But there was no stopping Sebastien Loeb. He came through the final day unscathed to secure an unprecedented 50th WRC victory for himself and co-driver Daniel Eleanor.
I remember when I beat the record of Carlos and Colin, and it's not so far behind, and now 50 is really a big number, nice number.
In the end, Loeb's winning margin was a healthy 27.2 seconds. Solberg a jubilant third ahead of Sordo. The build-up to Rally Portugal was dominated by the anticipation of double world champion Marcus Gronholm's return to action. The Big Finn was back in town, and he would certainly make an impact. It was Gronholm's compatriot Jari-Matti Latvala, though, who was the man to watch on the opening morning, storming out to a 10-second lead after fastest times on the opening two gravel stages. The young Finn had a pivotal team role to play to prevent Loeb and Citroën from dominating another event, but in his eagerness to do well, Jari-Matti was caught out by one of Rally Portugal's famous blind crests.
Jari-Matti!
Hey.
His mistake could have been far more costly. Amazingly, both Latvala and co-driver Mika Antila walked away unscathed, a true testament to the safety of a modern WRC car.
It's been the biggest accident I have ever had.
Mikko Hievinen desperately needed a win to get his championship challenge back on track. He stormed past Danny Sordo into the lead on the first afternoon. Sebastien Loeb made an uncharacteristic error on the opening stage of the rally, overshooting a junction and then losing several seconds while he waited for the dust to clear. This mistake, combined with having to sweep the road clear of loose gravel as the first car on the road, left him down in seventh, but he admirably fought back to third place by the end of the day. Day two began with a bang as Marcus Gronholm started in fourth, determined to make the most of his lower start order. But his over-enthusiasm at being back in the fight led to an early mistake. A frustrating finish to his return to action. Rally fans around the world would be hoping he'd come back for more. As rally leader at the start of the day, it was Hievinen's turn to struggle for pace in the road sweeping role, and he would immediately come under pressure from behind. Loeb stormed past his teammate Sordo first and wasted little time chasing down the rally leader. Sebastien took over the top spot on stage 9 and would never look back. The Frenchman set fastest times on every stage of day 2 and by the end had built up a lead of almost half a minute. Hievinen began the final morning hopeful of getting back on terms with the world champion, but despite his more favourable road position, he was unable to make much of an impact. Petter Solberg was having another solid rally, and following Gronholm's departure, he moved up into his familiar role of the best of the rest behind the WRC Fords and Citroëns in fourth. But Out in front once again was that man, Sebastian Loeb. The Frenchman managed to keep Hirvonen at bay once again and made it 4 out of 4 wins in the 2009 season. Another tremendous display of driving from Loeb saw him claim victory by a margin of 24.3 seconds. Hirvonen settled for another second-place spot, with Sordo third and Petter Solberg fourth. As Loeb's perfect start continued then, it's a testament to Hirvonen's own consistency that he was only 10 points behind in the championship race. Further back, Petter Solberg had moved ahead of his brother Henning by virtue of his podium in Cyprus. Another fantastic weekend for Citroën, and another big mistake for Latvala saw the French team extend their lead in the manufacturers' title race to 24 points. The next stop for the WRC was Argentina, a firm favourite with the drivers, as over 1 million fans were expected to line the stages over the weekend. 4 drivers exchanged the lead 8 times over the first 9 stages. Mikko Hirvonen was desperate to make up ground, so took the fight to world champion Sebastian Loeb. Danny Sordo also pushed hard, his marked improvement on this surface plain for all to see, as he edged in front by the end of the day. Latvala had also led, performing his job as number 2 driver, supporting Hirvonen until a puncture continued his run of cursed bad luck as he dropped down to 6th, nearly a minute off the lead. At the start of day 2, all eyes were on 3rd place Sebastian Loeb. Like a panther stalking his prey, he was ready to pounce. He was clearly pushing here as he approached the end of the first stage. Lightning quick reactions saved him from potential disaster, and he took the lead over the next 2 stages. Hirvonen valiantly kept Loeb in his sights, setting up a classic battle by mid-afternoon. Then catastrophe struck. Mikko reported a sudden and dramatic rise in engine temperature, and the Ford team told him to back off to make it to the end of the stage. In the road section, Hirvonen tried everything he could to get his focus going again. Despite his considerable mechanical knowledge, eventually he had to accept his fate. With Loeb now in the lead, things look bleak for Ford's number 1.
Oh, bad luck.
Where'd you go from here?
I think I'm just going to go back hotel, have a beer.
With Hirvonen out, Jari-Matti Latvala was under tremendous pressure to see out this rally and take 3rd place. He needed to take care on this final day, as there were still challenging stages to complete. That sudden impact and resulting electrical failure lost the despairing Finn over 8 minutes, a cruel end to another calamitous weekend for Ford. And the drama wasn't over yet in Argentina. Petter Solberg now looks set to claim another podium. But this terminal drop in fuel pressure signalled heartbreak for the Norwegian.
This is not a good place to stop.
I'm gutted, yeah.
The extremely happy beneficiary from Petter's retirement was none other than older brother Henning Solberg, who could do little to hide his glee.
I'm very sorry for Petter, but one man's dead is another man's bread, so that's how it is.
Local hero Federico Valagra made big news on the final day, thrilling his fellow countrymen, taking 4th place, his best ever finish in a WRC event. Danny Sordo comfortably took 2nd place with another reliable performance on gravel. And Loeb took his 5th win of the season and a convincing lead in the Drivers' Championship. Even more worrying for Ford was the gap that had opened up in the manufacturers' race. Loeb looked unbeatable, 5 wins out of 5, and the talk was of a clean sweep from the season for the Frenchman. Sordo claimed 2nd, and a very happy Henning Solberg took his 1st podium of the year. Rally Sardinia has a history brimming with incidents and excitement, and the latest instalment would take some beating. Loeb arrived on a high following a devastating winning run that had seen him pull out a 19-point lead in the drivers' standings. Running first on the road in Sardinia, Loeb would slip and slide as he swept away the loose gravel, creating a line of grip for those behind. The further back you start, the better the grip. So Hirvonen was not impressed when he found himself starting ahead of Sordo when the Spaniard was delayed by turbo problems. The suspicion that these problems were a tactical move by Citroën was compounded when Mikko lost a position to the imperious Loeb. No one wanted to be first on the road for day 2. Loeb deliberately slowed by 23 seconds, but Hirvonen made a mess of slowing down to fall behind the Frenchman. Stopping after the yellow boards is illegal. Mikko ran out of road and finished up 3 seconds ahead of his chief rival. Ford needed a rethink of their tactics, and the first decision was to release Latvala. The Finn found himself leading the rally by almost 40 seconds at the end of the first day. Would this be a big enough gap to hold off Loeb? On the second leg, the Frenchman was expected to make one of his customary attacks. It wasn't to be, though. First, a delay in a road section to bleed his brakes resulted in a 10-second penalty. Later, a damaged tyre valve on stage 11 forced a mid-stage wheel change. And while it was done incredibly quickly, Seb would end the day 4th, over a minute behind the leader. It wouldn't be the last he'd hear about his wheel change either. Up front, though, a mature, committed drive from Latvala saw him overcome his disadvantage of running first on the road to stay ahead of his teammate. Hirvonen closed the gap to just 10 seconds despite the distraction of wild horses at the start of the day. In theory, Mikko was best placed to fight for the win, as he would have the superior road position on the final morning. But Hirvonen was immediately choking in Latvala's dust trail on the opening stage. Attacking his teammate was impossible. Petter Solberg was relishing fighting with his old rival Loeb for 3rd place. At the head of the field, the question was, would Ford order Latvala to allow Hirvonen to take the lead? Mikko made it clear that he would refuse, so after leading from start to finish, Jari-Matti took a well-deserved second victory of his career.
Self-confidence has been really, really low. I have done a lot of mistakes. I think so. Some people have maybe even thinking about my future quite a lot, but team has had the support on me, and now it's finally we got it back there, and like a new evolution.
The drama wasn't over in Sardinia, though. Back on day 2, when Loeb and Eleanor changed their tyres so fast, they actually broke the rules by taking off their seatbelts while the car was still moving. The FIA handed them a 2-minute penalty.
I didn't take any risk. I'm the first one who is in the car, so I don't want to go in a tree without the belt. But okay, the regulation is the regulation, and maybe we did a bit wrong, so we accept that.
Jari-Matti Latvala took his first win of the season, a dramatic turnaround after what had been, by his own admission, a disastrous year so far. Hirvonen was second, with a delighted Petter Solberg taking his second podium of the year. Hirvonen made up valuable ground in the drivers' battle. What had looked like a foregone conclusion was now not looking quite so secure, with the next round to come on the gravel of Greece. In the manufacturers, Ford had done everything they could to reel in Citroën. After the break, the championship is turned on its head as Loeb's title challenge begins to unravel. Welcome back for the next instalment of the championship from Greece. After Ford's triumph in Sardinia, the pressure was now on Sebastian Loeb to respond. There was little he could do on the opening day, however. In his usual road-sweeping role, he was struggling for grip and off the pace. Mikko Hirvonen had a slightly clearer line than Loeb, but while he was quicker, he was involved in a fight with Dani Sordo. Having built up a lead of 21 seconds, he elected not to back off to ensure a better road position for day 2. Sordo, on the other hand, did exactly that, slowing down for a full 19 seconds to fall behind Hirvonen on the leaderboard and on the road for the next leg. Jari-Matti Latvala, meanwhile, was flying and had led the rally for the opening 5 stages. On the day's final test, though, he lost 3 minutes trying to get his focus out of a ditch and slipped down to 11th. The second day began in dramatic style. Loeb was 3rd on the road and in a good position to mount his pursuit of the rally leader. It wasn't to be, though. On the very first stage, the Frenchman suffered the biggest accident of his career. The C4 was destroyed and Loeb was out of the rally. Both Sebastian and Daniel Eleanor escaped unharmed, and after making it back to the service park, the world champion explained what happened.
Now we are 500 meters before our crash, so it's a very fast place in Greece. And now I will change the note, this one, and maybe I'm a bit distracted and I hit a stone here inside, and then we had a few rolls.
2 stages later, things would get even worse for Citroën. An unseen rock on the inside of a corner broke Sordo's suspension, and the Spaniard was also out of the rally. Not far behind was Henning Solberg. After hitting the same rock, the Stobart 4 man came to a halt just behind Sordo's C4, and Henning clearly felt he should have been warned.
At least we called down and said it was a stone. We were staying there for 5 minutes, and this man pulled me over here. And I cannot see if the man is staying like this or this. Huh? I've waited 5 minutes on the start.
Petter Solberg suddenly had a sniff of a first win since 2005, but on the penultimate stage of day 2, his suspension strut burst through its top mount. Although improvised repairs allowed him to continue, he was later forced to retire due to a lack of spare parts. With all his main rivals out of action, Hirvonen had built up a huge lead by the end of day 2. And Latvala had also kept his head over the final 2 days and picked up a fantastic podium. In second place was a delighted Sébastien Ogier. The Citroën Junior driver had a late scare when he hit a cow on the final morning, but fortunately the damage was only cosmetic. The happiest of all, though, was Hirvonen. The Finn had judged his pace perfectly and came through to score an emphatic win, his first of the 2009 season and the 70th victory for Ford. Mikko's margin of victory was a dominant 1 minute and 13 seconds ahead of Ogier, with Latvala in third. It couldn't have been a better result for Ford and Hirvonen.
We are back in the game now, and it did look really bad after Argentina. We were 20 points almost behind, so now it's only 7 points. So, can't wait. It's going to be really exciting end of the season.
Mikko's timely win and 0 points for Loeb had blown the championship race wide open. He was now just 7 points behind the Frenchman, while Latvala had moved up from 6th to 4th. And the second consecutive 18-point maximum for Ford had allowed the Blue Oval to close up just 15 points behind Citroën. After that huge crash in Greece, questions were being asked about Loeb's pattern of slip-ups on new stages. It seems that many of his incidents have happened on stages that are new to him, and in these exams, Loeb had no prior experience, and each one occurred on the first run through. So, did the world champion think it was related to the way he makes his pace notes?
Maybe a good memory from the stages, so when it's another second or third time in the stage, I remember. But when it's the first time, you have to improvise more maybe and sometimes take more risk.
At the next round in Poland, every stage would be new, and the Frenchman was the first to admit he's not a fan of making new pace notes.
For sure, I prefer to go on stages that we are used to go. It's easier, less work in Reiki, and so a bit less pressure, because when you do some new notes, you have to be very concentrated, and in the Reiki that you have one mistake and it can be bad. With 2 passes, it's impossible to do it perfect. Maybe it can be a stone that you didn't see, maybe you don't have the time to look if you can cut a bit in the grass or not, because you are concentrated on the angle. First pass, okay, I go to check if every cut is okay. Then second pass, you control your lines, and then it's perfect. But when it's the first time, it's difficult to have perfect notes.
But when he has made it through a stage once, Loeb is generally the fastest on the second pass.
If I have a bit time and I think, okay, I will be able to go faster in the second loop. Because you know that everything was right in the nose. Remember, this one I was a bit slow, this one I was a bit too fast, and then you can adjust everything and then it's going better.
Round 8 of the championship saw a return to Poland for the first time since 1973, and the roads of the stunning Missouri Lake District would serve up some of the fastest action ever seen in the WRC. After the biggest crash of his career in Greece, Loeb arrived with the pressure on. How would he react? First on the road, he led after stage 2, but just 4 stages in, the Frenchman was out again. An unseen tree stump destroyed his steering, and incredibly, he could take no further part in day 1. Kievanen would have scarcely been able to believe it. Victory here would blow the championship wide open, and he held the lead by the end of the day. Intense pressure was now on Dani Sordo to secure a good finish for Citroën. He had hoped to move into second, but an overshoot would cost the Spaniard valuable seconds. At the end of the day, it was a Ford 1-2 after Jari-Matti Latvala had set some astonishingly quick times. 18-year-old Evgeny Novikov was 5th, improving his speed when a late pace note from his co-driver Dale Muscat resulted in broken suspension. Into the second day, and Dani Sordo piled the pressure on the Fords. A blisteringly quick start saw him halve the gap to Latvala to just 16.5 seconds. Jari-Matti had been forced to increase his speed to keep the Spaniard behind, and in the process had closed up to just 3 seconds behind his teammate. Again, the speed on these Polish stages was incredible. But Kievanen managed to maintain his pace and extend his advantage out front over Sordo and Latvala. On day 3, Novikov was still having a wild ride, having returned under the Super Rally rules. While Sordo was eventually forced to concede defeat in his hopes of catching the Fords, following another costly overshoot on the final morning. Sébastien Ogier's fine run to 4th would come to a premature end when his engine dramatically lost power on stage 16. While world champion Loeb had been working his way up the leaderboard after incurring 20 minutes in time penalties, with Ogier out, Citroën asked Novikov and Conrad Rautenbach to slow and promote Seb into 8th place. And in dramatic scenes, Loeb's 8th would become 7th. As with the end in sight, Latvala clipped a barrel in the final Super Special, and with his team watching on, another 18-point haul was ruined before their eyes. Devastatingly, his 2nd place was gone. It was a frustrating way to end what had been a perfect weekend for Ford, but the team could still celebrate their number 1 driver, Mikko Kievanen, taking the championship lead with a 2nd successive victory. But what now for Ford and Latvala?
I understand really if they don't want me to carry on with the team. I really understand it.
Team boss Malcolm Wilson was infuriated and faced some difficult decisions. Mikko won by over a minute, but with his teammate out, everyone behind moved up a place, elevating Sordo to 2nd and allowing Henning Solberg to claim his 2nd podium of the season, and Loeb picked up an extra point. Mikko moved into the championship lead for the first time this season. It could have been a 2-point lead were it not for Latvala's nightmare finish to the rally. In the Manufacturers' Championship, instead of gaining on Citroën, the Super Special saga actually saw Ford slip further behind their rivals. They were 17 points back. After taking the championship lead, Mikko Kievanen arrived at his home event in confident mood, and it showed. The Finn took the lead on the 2nd stage and was giving it everything to stay there. On the back of his worst run of luck for years, Loeb needed to respond. The Frenchman won half of the day's forest stages, but trailed Mikko by 3.3 seconds at the end of the opening leg. Dani Sordo had a fine drive to hold off local star Jari-Matti Latvala. Peter Solberg had briefly been running in second until a heavy landing and 2 subsequent punctures resulted in an early finish to day 1 for the Norwegian. There were problems too for Evgeny Novikov. Pace note confusion resulted in a collision with a tree, and day 1 retirement would soon follow. On the second day, Loeb set off in pursuit of Hirvonen, but after steadily losing ground on the second morning, a tyre problem on stage 15 cost him 13 seconds and ultimately ended his hopes. In the fight for third, Latvala fought back. Under pressure to perform following his embarrassing error in Poland, the 24-year-old steadily increased his pace and overhauled Sordo on stage 16. The moment of the day, though, again fell to Novikov. Returning under the Super Rally rules, he almost took off over one jump, coming inches from flipping the car, and was out of the running again a few corners later.
Watch out, Chris. 50, Chris.
No, that's it, mate.
The big news was the WRC debut of former Formula 1 world champion Kimi Räikkönen. The local star had set an impressive pace in a privately entered Fiat Punto until a final morning crash ended his run. Hirvonen, meanwhile, had built up a lead of over half a minute with just the 4 stages of the final leg to run. And his teammate Latvala was relieved to bring his car home for a fine podium finish on home soil. And it had been another fine performance from Sebastian Loeb to claim second place. There had been nothing he could do about catching local star Hirvonen, though. It had been a faultless run, and he claimed his 3rd win in a row, his first on home soil, and an absolutely crucial one in terms of his championship chances. Hirvonen's winning margin was 25.1 seconds over Loeb, with Latvala doing enough to hold off Sordo to claim 3rd.
I've been looking at the rally since I was a kid to myself, and now finally won it myself. And I got my name along the many of Finnish legends who won the rally, so it's absolutely a great feeling.
Mikko moved on to 68 points in the Drivers' Championship, with Sebastian 3 behind on 65. Sordo maintained his 3rd place. Coming up, the 2009 Championship reaches a thrilling finale as the title race goes down to the wire. Welcome back. The new look Rally Australia arrived at a crucial moment in the title race. Mikko Hirvonen started with a slender 3-point lead in the drivers' standings, and despite running first on the road, the Finn still showed impressive early speed. One of the stars of the opening day was Citroën Junior Sébastien Ogier. The Frenchman led for 3 stages after winning both runs through the Willem-Bar streets for the Super Specials, and making the most of a favourable road position, he was fighting for the lead all day. Ahead of Ogier by just 2.2 seconds at the end of day 1 was Jari-Matti Latvala. Despite breaking a cross member early on, with 6 stage wins, Ford's number 2 did just enough to stay in front. Loeb claimed a lack of confidence in his C4's early setup, but the world champion found some speed as the day progressed, overhauling Hirvonen on the repeat runs through the Tarmac Super Specials. Hirvonen began the second morning 3rd on the road and was immediately on a charge. He claimed the first stage win despite clipping a mailbox and breaking a side window. Another big moment a couple of stages later was an indication how hard he was pushing. Loeb was thriving on the second day's flat-out stages, setting an average speed of over 130 kilometers an hour in some stages. He charged into the lead by the early afternoon. Latvala's hopes of staying in touch with the top 3 were given a fateful blow when he knocked a tyre off its rim on stage 22. He lost 30 seconds and 3 places. It could have been another crucial error at a critical time by Ford's number 2. Thankfully for Jari-Matti, Ogier too was in the wars. The C4 driver spun his car and jammed it in a bank. There was just 1.8 seconds between the 2 men fighting for 4th going into the final day. Having worked hard to get into the lead, with the final day's road position to now consider, Loeb felt he had no choice but to back off and fall behind Hirvonen. Loeb would now have the better start position the following morning. Crucially, the Frenchman would have the upper hand. On the final morning, Hirvonen was determined to fight for the win, despite Loeb's slightly superior road position. He claimed the fastest time in stage 28, but was still steadily losing touch with the world champion, who'd wasted little time moving back into the lead. Mikko had a fight on his hands to even hold on to second, as Citroen's number 2, Sordo, had kept the pressure on right through to the finish boards of the final stage. But Loeb had driven this rally to perfection. His dominance in Australia had wrestled back the initiative in the title race. This victory could have proved key in deciding the outcome of the championship. Then, in one of the shocks of the season, the post-event scrutineers found an irregularity with the front left links to the anti-roll bar of all 3 leading Citroens. As a result, Loeb, Sordo and Ogier were handed 1-minute penalties. This dramatic late twist meant that Hirvonen was now the winner, with Loeb second and Latvala moving into 4th. The pendulum had now swung back to Hirvonen, who led by 5 points instead of 1 going into Spain, where Loeb is the clear favourite. But Citroën could at least take some solace in the fact that the late twist only cost them 1 point in the Manufacturers' Championship. They now led by 13 ahead of Ford. With just 2 rallies left, how costly would Citroën's administrative error prove to be for Loeb? He would have been merely a point behind and was now 5. Loeb desperately needed to continue his 4-year Spanish winning run to get his championship challenge back on track, and unsurprisingly, he was immediately fighting for the lead. Out front early on though was home hero Danny Sordo. Citroen's number 2 led his teammate by 1.6 seconds after day 1. Hirvonen knew that 2 second places in the final 2 rounds would secure the driver's title, but despite extra tarmac tuition, he again couldn't match the works Citroen's speed. Mikko beat Loeb on the opening stage, but was over half a minute behind the leader after day 1. In 4th place was Petter Solberg. In his first drive in the Citroën C4, the former world champion was relishing having the latest technology at his fingertips. On day 2, Sordo continued to battle with his teammate for the lead, but with Hirvonen still running in a distant 3rd, the dutiful team player Danny began to ease off the pace in stage 12, ensuring Loeb would end Saturday as the leader. Further back, Sébastien Ogier was on a flyer. Running in 5th, he claimed his first 2 tarmac stage wins on day 2, pulling away from Veli-Matti Latvala, and began to close on Petter Solberg's 4th spot. The Norwegian, though, was growing in confidence with every passing stage, setting 4 fastest stage times of his own, securing 4th on the final day. Petter's pace had also begun to concern Hirvonen, but the Finn managed to hold on to 3rd place and ensure he maintained the championship lead. And out front, with his teammate in between himself and his title rival, Loeb came through to claim his 53rd win, his first since Argentina in April, and an absolutely crucial one in terms of the championship race. With Sordo backing off towards the finish, Loeb claimed his 5th successive Spanish victory by a margin of 12 seconds, with Hirvonen a distant 3rd. Petter Solberg took 4th ahead of Ogier, but it was the winner who had the most to celebrate.
This one was tough because Danny was pushing very hard at the start. We tried to fight. Then we knew also that we don't have to make any mistake, just fighting together. It's so important for us to finish. But we were really confident. It was really a pleasure to drive again on tarmac.
So with just the final round to go, Loeb had closed the deficit to the championship leader to a solitary point. It had become the closest title race for 6 years, and Sordo had sewn up 3rd place. And with an unassailable lead in the Manufacturers' Championship, Citroën retained the title with a round to spare. Ford were 21 points behind. So with just 1 point splitting the top 2 in the drivers' race, let's have a little recap as to how we got to this dramatic championship position. We didn't think it was going to be this close in the early part of the season. Loeb won the first 5 events: the Irish tarmac, the Norwegian snow, the tarmac and gravel of Cyprus, and the gravel of Portugal and Argentina. Some were already predicting a clean sweep for the Citroën driver, and when Mikko's engine blew in Argentina, it looked like the Finn was thinking that as well.
Where'd you go from here?
think I'm just gonna go back hotel and have a beer.
But Lady Luck was about to switch sides. A damaged tyre and a 2-minute penalty in Sardinia meant Seb was beaten by Mikko for the first time. And Seb followed this with the biggest off of his career in Greece. Mikko took maximum advantage, claiming the 10 points. The fight back had started. Seb makes few mistakes, so the rally world was left speechless when he followed this with an opening day blunder in Poland, courtesy of a hidden tree stump. He could only finish 7th, while Mikko won again on these super fast stages and took the lead in the championship. And Mikko was fastest again in Finland, beating Loeb on the most challenging event of them all. He proved he was a genuine contender. He was outdriven and outthought though by his rival at the all-new Rally Australia, but in another dramatic reversal of fortune, Mikko's second place would become first when, due to a paperwork error, Loeb's C4 was deemed to have run with an illegal anti-roll bar link. As expected, Loeb took victory at round 11 in Spain, but with Mikko in third, he retained the championship lead by just that single point.
When you start the last rally of the season and you know everything will be decided here, it's very important.
It is something I've always dreamed of since I was a kid.
I know that one of me and Mikko will be disappointed at the end of the weekend.
It is the most important rally that I ever had, so it's going to be a big weekend.
So, to the final round, round 12, and Rally GB would be the arena for the nail-biting conclusion of the 2009 season. Mikko, as championship leader, was first into the stages, trying to stake his claim to the driver's title. But it was Loeb who made the first move, ending the opening day with a 5-second lead. Kivenen's Ford teammate Jari-Matti Latvala had a disastrous start to Rally GB when his front drive shaft broke, losing a lot of time, and then the subsequent brake problems only added to his woes. On the opening stage of day 2, Mikko reduced the gap to Loeb to just over 2 seconds. But on stages 8 and 9, Loeb beat the Finn by a staggering 20 seconds, and suddenly the title looked a long way off. Loeb took more time in the afternoon loop to end the day, a daunting 30 seconds ahead of Hirvonen with just 4 stages to go. Day 3, and it was time for Mikko to throw caution to the Welsh wind. The Finn blasted into the final stages knowing he had nothing to lose. It paid off as he almost halved Loeb's lead on the second stage of the final morning. The Frenchman was suffering with a turbo problem, and suddenly the title race was wide open again. But on stage 15, a heavy landing after a jump dislodged Mikko's bonnet, which worked its way loose, blocking any vision. He was forced to stop so his co-driver could rip the bonnet off the car. A minute was lost and his title chances were in tatters.
I lost the rally maybe yesterday when I just couldn't find speed on those 2 stages, so you know, I just need to go back to work and try to find more speed for next year.
Behind the championship contenders, a battle had raged for 3rd place. In his first outing in a C4 on gravel, Petter Solberg had chased Dani Sordo all the way, but in the end it was a faultless drive from the Spaniard that saw him take 3rd. In 2009, Sebastian Loeb had faced one of the toughest challenges to his now 6-year reign. Despite his mid-season wobble, ultimately, Sebastian and co-driver Daniel Elena wouldn't be denied their unprecedented 6th world title.
We arrived here with 1 point behind Mikko. Finally we've done it, but it was big pressure, and really happy for this one because Mikko is really strong, and so it was an incredible battle all the season.
Confirmation then of Loeb's dramatic win, the 54th of his career, and despite immense pressure, teammate Dani Sordo held off the charging Petter Solberg for 3rd. After being pushed for every kilometre of the championship by Heerven, the Frenchman beat the courageous Finn by only a single point. And in the manufacturers, Citroën finished on 167 points to Ford's 140. Well, that's it for 2009, and what a season it's been, as we leave you with a few of the best memories.
Right,